we're bringing up for final review, I believe, final review of the draft regulation for boating regulations. Thank you very much for highlighting the items in question. And was there any further input on any of those items we discussed as a commission?
No, I had highlighted the traffic patterns, that was question last time. The speed regulations, I took back to where it was at the 6 and 8, 150 feet from shore, except 200 on Lake Cushman and Mason Lake. The wake surfing, I put that language in.
You do like it?
No.
You don't like it?
Here's, it's like trying to enforce the speed limit on Aggie Road, going up the hill. Okay, going up is 45, coming down is 35. I can't enforce that because, well, it's 45 going up, but it's 35 coming down. How do you tell the people that they're wrong? You know, because they're used to, if it's 45 on one end and it's 45 on the other. Same argument can be said about 150 on some lakes and 200 feet on another lake, especially with our population and the people that have been complaining about this. They're not full-time residents. So if they're always running on Phillips Lake, and then they decide to go try the big lake, and they go up to Mason Lake or Lake Cushman, and we've increased it out to 200 feet, they're gonna go, oh, it was 150 on Phillips, why is it 200? You know, it's a matter of education and trying to enforce it fairly across the board. So if we're really gonna do this, and it seems most of the larger voice of the citizens is 150 feet, then let's make it 150 feet, period. You know, or 200 feet, period. But to try to have the different deputies enforce different rules on different water with different people, the educational, it's just going to be overwhelming, especially with our ins and outs and people coming and going. And I think it'd be a lot easier to enforce and to educate the public if we just pick a single distance and stick with it. That's,
If you go to 150, I mean, some of these, what I heard from some of these lakes is that would preclude any opportunity.
You want
No, it's
200.
200.
Yeah, if you go to.
Well, I measured on Google. Phillips Lake's the biggest screamer about the 200. It still leaves them a 350-foot wide channel to go down, even at 200 feet. It's not going to close the lake. But again, I don't.
You didn't think this would get as much controversy as
You know,
it did.
really, it didn't. And I really, the distance for me is a minor issue. Okay? It's a minor issue. I'm more worried about things like updating the BUI laws, updating the boating, mandatory boating safety laws, updating the PFD. I mean, fixing things like, well, at sunset you can only go 8 miles an hour, but in the next paragraph you can water ski up to an hour after. What? You can't, you know, so we fixed those problems. Again, I don't care. 150, 200, I don't care.
We're not gonna
Whichever
have
you
a tape
decide.
measure out there measuring.
Yeah, and
If it's enforcement, it's gonna be tough.
Yeah.
It's gonna be tough either, no matter what distance you pick. I'm more worried about getting the whole thing up to 2016 instead of 1988. I know we had a big question about the counterclockwise pattern. There's a reason we say all boats go counterclockwise. It's so we don't have head-ons like we had at Island Lake at noon last year. We had a fishing boat going one way and we had a ski boat going the other. Ski boat was going the correct way, fishing boat wasn't. They ran over the top of each other. So if we get them all the same direction, and I understand about at all times, we've always enforced it this way. If you wanted to go down the lake somewhere behind you, you start out counterclockwise, go out to the middle of the lake, run back down. The idea is to get out of the traffic pattern so you don't create that head-on. So to go out to the middle of the lake, run down to where you need to go, and then come back in. It's like the old rules for water skiing. You left from your dock, you went straight out into the lake, and then you started doing your water skiing once you got away from the docks and the shores. It's just trying to make a safe traffic pattern on the lakes. And the smaller the lake, the more that becomes an issue. We've got running people over with boats is not good. So.
And then the wake surfing language we added.
So, I think at least one gentleman testified against that, in that not all people can ski.
Yeah,
3
can't
foot
do
or
it
whatever,
or
foot or
whatever.
something like that. And again, enforcing it.
Can you talk to me about enforcement on something like that?
That was my suggestion,
Uh-huh.
but my background is surfing in the ocean.
Uh-huh.
And I
Okay.
surf behind boats, I surf behind boats. I've surfed on both sides of the wake. I understand what their thought is. I hadn't really considered that, so I don't know that it's gonna make that big a difference. The interesting thing of it is I paid attention to it this weekend as well, because I'm on the water continuously. Even if you throw the wake to the inside, it goes all the way across, hits the shore, and comes right back. You're still getting it, especially in the narrow portions, like in Phillips Lake or in some of the portions in Mason's Lake. It's just like a toilet bowl in there at times, because the waves are hitting the shore, coming back in, hitting the shore, coming back in. So I don't know that it necessarily was going to have the intent that I originally thought.
I agree,
And-
I need word and I can't get
For me to
through
actually
there sometimes.
enforce this, I'm gonna have to make them take their boats out of the water so I can look at the plate and see if the plate's a fixed plate or is a adjustable plate. Plus.
Maybe I'll just scratch it off with that one.
I mean,
Yeah, that's not gonna be
Yeah.
good.
it's a good idea, or, you know,
Just
the
preliminary.
thought of it was good. It's just, it's gonna be a really hard one to try to.
Originally, I liked it with but only with the caveat that if you're within 200 feet, you go to one side. But again, if you've got to take it out to look, then.
For me to be able to tell if the plate, either that or I'm gonna have to start swimming a lot. You know, I'm gonna have to get underneath and see if the plate is actually an adjustable plate or if it's just one that comes straight down and that's it.
And even if they loaded all their ballast on one side, they're still throwing out a wake on both sides.
So, it's an idea, but it's gonna be, again,
It fell short.
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be one of those hard ones to enforce, like to the speed limits.
Out of curiosity, does anybody think that this type of surfing is gonna continue on?
Oh,
Or is
yes.
it
Oh,
something that's
it's-
gonna go
I'll tell
away?
you why it's big, is because it's very easy on your body, you don't crash hard, it's easy to do, and it's a lot of fun. So therefore, people that won't ski because of injuries or won't wakeboard because of the hard crashes will do the surfing, and they can do it all day long.
And the speed is a lot lower,
You're at 9 miles an hour.
10 miles an hour. I mean, they're plowing the boats on purpose to make the big waves, but on the flip side, the guy that's surfing, he's only going 8-9 miles an hour versus,
So it might be a function of redesigning bulkheads.
well, if it becomes a big issue
If it
shoreline,
becomes that.
I don't think it's going away.
it's not going away. I mean, what's going away is straight water skiing. I'm hard as
With two skis, you mean?
out on the lakes,
You
I
haven't seen that
rarely, out on the lakes, I rarely see anybody just straight water skiing.
You gotta get up at 6 to find that, because it's
Yeah.
the only time there's no waves.
Other than that, they're not out there.
Especially with the inner tubes.
Yeah, you got the inner tubes and you got the wakeboarders and now you've got the surfers, which has become very popular. Saw one the other day on the Hood Canal. He's out surfing the wake,
Times have changed.
so.
I like pontoon boats now, so I've changed it. It's easy peasy.
Then the last one is the shoreline marker buoys. I have a question on that. Is there a reason that we only allow one buoy?
That has been a big deal in the past, and I was thinking that too when that came up. People do not like to have more than one.
Some
because-
people don't like having more than one.
In
because
front of
they-
your own home?
No,
Well,
the landowner does, the boaters do not.
or their neighbors next door don't like seeing a solid row of buoys across their lake. They want the view without the buoys.
And people tend to put them out, because I remember in the past, it's been people calling in to say, my neighbor has 3 out there and they're not even the right distance, and they keep on creeping them out. Because then they have a safe swimming area, but then the boaters can't come in. And they always, I mean, there was a time there, and I don't know, maybe it's just people aren't doing it, but people would call to complain about their neighbor having more than one and creeping them out.
The biggest thing's been creeping out,
They're 300 feet out on some of the places right now.
because people just,
You're not supposed to come in with your boats and
yeah, so they're pushing,
Because I can see
they're
there
doing
being
it
a nice
themselves.
safety guard
They're
for
pushing
the
people out,
swimming.
and they're getting so many out there that,
It's become basically a skiing buoy for some of these wakeboarders, because they don't even pay attention to it. They go around
Oh, they
them
go
and-
around
and
it.
jump them, and it becomes fun.
Okay.
Well, in the past, Long Lake up in Port Orchard was always an example of why you don't have so many. They got to the point where it was not a lake to look at anymore. And as I
Right.
said, they had buoys everywhere. And I know something happened, kids, because they ended up taking most of them out. There's
looks
still
like an
areas.
oil boom system.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
That was, it was just to, if you change the distance, and that was, everything else I just put it except the changes. That was clean up to code.
So, anyway, that's the big thing. The distances, that's for you guys. Just please, if we're gonna do it, let's keep it the same, so it makes it easier for education, for the public, and enforcement.
Okay, so Diane, this is a question I have, because this is a recommended, I mean, this is a commissioner recommendation for hearing, for consideration,
Yes.
right? So we get to alter the draft that gets put out there
Yes, this
for
was something
hearing.
staff just put together saying,
Okay.
based on what we were hearing from public, this is,
So at this
An
point, can we make adjustments to this draft?
I would say if you want to do some cleanup and have something that you would be more than likely to adopt, we could do that. So I can put that out on the
And then we have to
website.
be in agreement here, or what if we're not in agreement here?
I think we can come to agreement here. I have a real kind of feeling that the public gets shortchanged here. And Deputy, it wasn't your fault, but after the last public hearing, when everybody left, you came up, which you did, to talk to the commissioners. And they started a conversation began about just what happened and some of the alternatives and everything. And I said, I have to leave. And the reason I said I have to leave is that would be an illegal public meeting. Once we adjourn, we cannot sit and discuss the ins and outs of the voting ordinance with you. And that's just, and it wasn't your fault, but it was the commissioner's fault. And that's why I got up and left, and I said, this is a conversation that should be held in a public meeting. And I think we have to be very careful of that.
Okay, so we are in a public meeting right now, and so my question is, do you have any issues with us altering these changes that were proposed here at this point, so that when we go to hearing, it can be a nice, clean copy without a lot of revisions? If we, it's not clear to me, you have a philosophy that we don't make decisions here,
Not a
but
philosophy. It's not a philosophy.
it's in our rules that we
it's-
can make decisions here.
Yes.
As far as
Well,
what
you-
would be, as
You
far
two
as,
want to make a decision here, that's okay with me, because I don't think it's okay with the public. If you want to revise it, I think each commissioner has an opportunity to revise it if they want. But the only decision you can make, I believe, is at the dais here when it comes before the public.
Your final decision would be yes at a Tuesday meeting, but yes, here, there are technically decisions, even if you wanted to say, let's just leave it at the 150 feet. Of course, on Tuesday, you can say, no, let's go back, or 300 or whatever, because that's when you do vote, and that is the final decision. But briefings are considered open public meeting, and yes, in our rules, decisions can be made, even though it's not our practice. We certainly don't make final decisions in briefings.
You know, that's why we're registered with the state registrar as actually having a window for these meetings, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, what is it, from 9 till 5? you
In our
have it.
county code, that's,
And that's how we're registered with the state, to be able to conduct these businesses.
And there was no window after the gavel fell the other night, public hearing, to continue working on
we're
it.
not talking about that, we're talking about right now.
Well, I know you can always say that we're not talking about it, but I bring it up because it was a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. And I brought it up the other day when you two were at a meeting in Belfort together. It was a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. You challenged me about it. I reviewed the tape.
I didn't challenge you, I said I don't remember whether or not I had announced that
And
I
I
was
said I would
attending the
look.
North Basin Voice meeting on that Monday.
I looked, and it was a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. The Open Public Meetings Act also has provisions for training for elected officials, which I believe we've all taken. There's also heavy penalties, personal penalties and fines for violating the Open Public Meetings Act.
Okay, back to the question. I would prefer to, how do I do this? Do you want to make your recommendations? Do you want to make any recommendations on any alterations to this draft?
Well, there's been some changes here, and I'll make my decision at the continued public hearing.
What was the decision, or what was the change?
There's been some changes. Apparently, there's been some changes here for the 200 feet on Cushman and,
I think
I
that's
added the language after the last hearing.
yeah.
I took it back to the 150, which is what it has been, except
At
On-
Cushman and
on those two.
Mason.
The draft that I would like to propose that we have available would strike, however, on section 9.04.130.
Okay, let me follow it. What page now?
Page 7.
14130, okay?
Section A, subsection 2, to strike the underlined language, however, on only Mason Lake and Lake Cushman, the distance from shore shall be 200 feet. I would also recommend that we, or I would like to strike the language in 9.04.137, wake surfing, that entire section.
Both these.
I was on the same page, 7, but just at the bottom of the page in yellow highlight. And I'd like to allow more than one burrito, you know what? I don't want to go
that'll be a whole
there
other conversation.
yet. Thank you for the input, I appreciate that. I don't have the history, having young children swim in front of my property, I understand the need to have multiple buoys.
Commissioner, what about 235?
Oh,
Take out the 200 feet exactly, if that's,
Because he struck the one out of the one, I assume. he-
Yeah, thank you, 9.04.235 to, and that's why it's nice to have it done here, to remove the language in the second line, starting with, however, on only Mason Lake and Lake Cushman, the distance from shore shall be 200 feet.
so what I can do is I can strike that language so it'd be struck out, showing that way the public would see kind of how we progressed through the
So
draft.
underline gets struck out?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's still there, but
For your buoys, it's an idea, and I've seen people do this. They have two. So their property comes out, they put one at each corner, and that's it.
I gotta tell you, I'm a
Or
little
one in the
concerned about
middle.
unintended consequences at this
Right.
point.
I was going to say, that has not come up, and so that, for that to come up.
But I appreciate
Well,
that.
and it was under discussion that the public was allowed to have, and there was a vote to not allow for public testimony this last.
That's true, thank you for that.
It's, you know, it's gonna take, no matter what we do, it's still gonna take at least a year for me to educate me, as in the sheriff's office and the voting officers, to educate the people on what this final is going to be.
But now you finally have it, because you've been doing it from the, off the cuff for a long time.
No, we've had it, it's just been 1988 with things that were, again, I keep going back to water skiing. It's really hard to enforce an 8-mile-an-hour speed limit when you're also telling people you can water ski up to an hour after. I mean, we had contradictions that prevented some of the enforcement action. Hopefully this will get it to where we can now have a nice, clean ordinance so that we can educate them. And like I said, it'll probably be at least a year between contacting people about the buoys, the directions, the speeds.
So that's what I wanted to ask you. So there have been a number of residents that have suggested, or citizens that have suggested that we have signage at each of our boat launches. And I was curious whether the fees that are generated through the boat licensing that pays for some of our boating program would be appropriately put towards those signages, otherwise.
That's paying for getting deputies on the lakes right now.
Okay, so it would have to come out of current expense then.
Because we have deputies on lake only because of overtime. And that's all coming from that.
Okay. So,
Well, it wouldn't be very expensive. We have a sign shop.
Yeah.
okay, so.
We
It works as a sign shop, and
we tried to put some up. We lost.
I was gonna say, they were stolen, because we used to put them up.
We
Years
also
ago.
used to put no wake buoys up and those kind of things, and
They get stolen as well.
they get stolen.
They show up at the end of crab pots.
No, the no wake are the great big tall pylon ones, and those kept disappearing, especially off the Lost Lake, because the water skiers out there didn't like the fact that they couldn't go down their favorite channel because it was a no wake zone, so they just disappeared. And it got so expensive that Sergeant Peterson at the time, who was in charge of the program, said, we, the sheriff's office, cannot keep affording buying new buoys, chains, anchors, and going out and putting them in and then finding them and taking them back and putting them in. It just got really cost prohibitive. Again, like the chief said, every dollar we spend on buoys or signs or keep replacing this stuff, that's a dollar less I have for fuel or maintenance or
Well,
having
Sheriff
guys on the
Salisbury
boat.
had said too at one of them, you need more people go online.
For the, yeah, I just, I'm trying to be responsive to the citizens.
Mason Lake's done it on their own. They have a
Mhm.
water watch
Yeah.
program. Mason Lake did their own.
They did their own signs.
Lake Cushman Homeowners Association has done their own signs with their stuff.
The positive of that is they take ownership of their lake too.
Well, it shouldn't come out of the boating program, but I don't think it's that big of a thing if we look into it and see how much it would cost to have small, simple signs that cover the main rules, such as counterclockwise, such as 150 feet from shore. And just have that posted, but it shouldn't be up to you guys to have to maintain it. As Commissioner Schultz said, we have a sign shop now, and the cost should be minimal.
Okay, thank you so much for your work on this.
Brown?